Nick Saban, the GOAT, has one major question about this Texas Longhorns football team. And after listening to his concern, I agree.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Remember, terms and conditions do apply. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, Nick Saban's biggest criticism of this Texas Longhorns football team going into the season, and why I agree with him. In the second segment, Coach Mike Elko from Texas A&M had some interesting comments, some to do with Texas, some to do with not. But, you know, now that that rivalry is renewed and they're in the SEC, we're in the SEC, I want to react to those comments. And then in the last segment, it's just a rivalry-based episode, I guess, right? Nick Saban, Mike Elko, and then Sam Pitman, right? He had a very interesting comment about Texas and that rivalry that I want to discuss in the third segment. So all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So it's been a cool week, really. It's been a cool transition from Big 12 Media Days to SEC Media Days. I'm so used to Big 12 Media Days. I went back and listened to the episode I posted yesterday, and I slipped up at least once, right, saying the Big 12 Media Days. And it's, it's in Dallas, right? So it's not hard to slip up, when we're used to going to Texas, Arlington or Dallas every year for Media Days. But it's been really cool, cool change of pace, cool to see all of these different, players and coaches react to Texas and Oklahoma being in the SEC and just being in a different environment, seeing the SEC on the screen, the different backgrounds. It's just really doing a good job of getting us prepped and getting us excited for this magical season that we're about to go on. I mean, this is a historical season, regardless of what happens, right? If Texas goes 2-12 or 12-2, right? It's still their first year in the SEC, right? You'll never have a first year in the SEC again. So just a historical year. And I think SEC Media Days have just done such a great job of really getting us excited, right? And then after this, it'll be all downhill, right? You got fall camp, and the next thing you know, Texas will be playing against Colorado State on August 31st. So really this is just marketing, right? It always is, the media days and everything over the summer is just marketing to get you to the season. And they're doing a really good job this week. We've heard a ton of profound quotes and, sound bites from some of the best in the business, right? Current or former. A lot of good stuff has come out from the players and the coaches at SEC Media Days. But, one of the perks of, a Titan like Nick Saban retiring is that you can get him on the coverage after, right? And so instead of Nick Saban being at SEC Media Days preparing to talk about Alabama and fielding questions about Alabama, now you have this resource in Nick Saban that can react to 16 different teams in the SEC, and that's what he's been able to do. And so Nick Saban, when he's not on the golf course, when he's not out, in the water with Miss Terry, he's doing a really good job on ESPN providing invaluable analysis on these SEC teams. And I thought that he said one thing about Texas. He's given Texas a ton of praise, picked Texas and Georgia to be in the SEC championship game this year, did not pick Alabama. And I thought Tyler Booker's quote on that just really quickly was amazing, right? When Tyler Booker, who plays guard for Alabama, they asked him about Nick Saban not picking Alabama to be in the SEC championship. Like I said, he picked Texas and Georgia. And he said when Nick Saban was our coach, he always told us not to worry about a guy in his mom's basement, right? Never let a guy in his mom's basement make you feel bad, right? And so he was like, I'm not going to let a guy who's golfs all day, talking about Nick Saban, make me feel bad, right? So I thought that was just one of the best answers at SEC Media Days. But nonetheless, like I said, Nick Saban has been providing invaluable information about all 16 SEC teams. And he was very complimentary of Texas, saying they had all the pieces they need to compete in the SEC. I know he said we wouldn't dominate or run the SEC like we ran the Big 12. But he did acknowledge that Texas would be one of the best football programs in the SEC and would make the championship game this year. His biggest concern, or his one concern about this football team, is who is going to be the other corner. All right, I'm going to say that again. Who is going to be the other corner? He said that. And that's something that I talked about last week when we got those updates from Inside Texas. And they were talking about there's still an ongoing battle between Javion Cole and Gavin Holmes, right? We've all heard the saying that if you got two women or two, whatever you like, right? If you got two of them, you have none, right? And I think this close to the season, if you're telling me that one day Javion Cole looks better and one day Gavin Holmes looks better, we don't have a corner right now, right? That's like, and position battles are great. It shows how much depth you have on the team. It shows how much talent you have on the team, that you have two viable options to start at that position. And of course, we have a ton of depth the way that we've recruited at that position, even losing Austin Jordan and Terrence Brooks. But there's no quarterback competition. We know it's Quinn Ewers, right? There's no wide receiver competition, at least for Isaiah Bond. Like, we know he's going to be out there starting in day one. There's no competition with Kelvin Banks. There's no competition with Jake Majors. There's no competition with Trey Moore. There's no competition with Anthony Hill. Like, you're picking up on my gist, right? Like, position battles are great because it shows you have a ton of talent and it shows you have a ton of depth. But a position battle also tells me you don't have a bona fide starter at that position. And it's July 19th, right? Like, it's not the end of the world that you don't have a bona fide starter at that position. But based on the way that our pass defense looked last year, and based on the fact that you let two at least serviceable corners hit the transfer portal, I would like for us at this point to be more definitive in who we're going to play at that position, or be more confident in who we're going to play at that position. Because at least right now, it looks like that won't be determined until fall camp, right? We won't know who our field corner is until probably a few weeks before the season. And based on the way our pass defense looked last year, based on the way our pass defense looked on the field against Washington, that certainly is cause for concern for me. And it's cause for concern for the GOAT, Nick Saban. These are direct quotes from him. He said they have a lot of components in place that you need to navigate the kind of season that you're going to play in the SEC. First of all, they got a really strong roster. They have lots of depth at most positions. Probably the only question on their team about players is who's going to be the other corner. That's the only question you would have on their whole team. And obviously when he says other corner, he means opposite of Malik Muhammad, because we know he's all world, right? It's only going to be that one question because corners do put the limitation. This is when the GOAT just starts talking ball, right? You know what I mean? And it's just music to all of our ears. It's only going to be that one question because corners do put the limitation on what you can do on defense. If you don't have good corners, you can't play a lot of man-to-man. You got to play soft sometimes. You can't get off the field on third down because you can't play man-to-man. You give up big plays because you're not good at the corner position. If that thing, second cornerback, comes through, that's why I picked these guys to be one of the best teams in the league. Probably them and Georgia are the two best teams I saw this spring. Like I said, when the GOAT speaks, I just listen. And I mean, he's just so profound in what he says. And he's absolutely right? Like, corners determine so much of what you can do on defense because it's the hardest position on defense, right? Now, you can have average to above average corners if you have an elite pass rush, but I'm not sure Texas has an elite pass rush at this point, right? And so your ability to stay in front of some of the most athletic people in the world and wide receivers and prevent them from getting open changes the entire complexion of the defense, right? If you don't have serviceable corners, this is what it can lead to, right? We've seen in the years, in past years, we've for years kind of expressed our disdain for all of the soft coverage that Pete Kwiatkowski was playing. But there's potentially a reason for soft coverage, right? Whether it's zone or you're still in man, but you're playing 8 to 10 yards off, right? If you don't have the confidence that your corners can step up, get in a wide receiver's face, reroute him, and stop him from getting separation or getting open, then you're not going to take that chance. Because once he beats that press, he's open, right? If you don't have a safety behind him or there's space between the corner and the safety, he's open. I felt like Pete Kwiatkowski over the last 3 years, and maybe that's just his style of defense, has not had full confidence in his ability or his corner's ability to get up in a wide receiver's face, jam him, and stop him, especially in the most crucial moments. And that's why we've had to play that soft coverage on third downs, right? But that's what Nick Saban is saying. If you don't have guys, if you don't have dogs that you can put in a wide receiver face and say, go shut him down, then that infects your entire defense. And a lot of times that leads to you staying on the field because you have to play soft to prevent the big play, right? Inability to consistently play man. When we look at some of the biggest dynasties of our lifetime in football, they played man coverage on defense. The Patriots, they went out there and played man coverage, right? Sometimes it's just best to simplify it. Even when you're playing NCAA 25, even when you're playing Madden, the best players just go out there and line up in man because there's always an answer for zone if you can't get a pass rush there. If you cannot get a pass rush there, there's going to be a wide receiver sitting wide open somewhere in the zone, or the zone is going to be compromised. The Patriots, at their best, when push came to shove, they went out there and said, you're going to play man. Alabama, when they were at their best in their dynasty, they went out there and said, you're going to play man. Georgia, the last 3 years, at their best, when push came to shove, they put their best athletes on the field and said, you're going to play man. Texas has the ability to do that, certainly. But if we can't figure out Javion Cole or Gavin Holmes, and that's a liability for us all season, what's stopping the offensive coordinator from putting his best receiver on that side and exploiting that matchup all game, right? Malik Muhammad, I'm confident in. The nickel star, I'm confident in. But right now, field corner at least seems like a liability. We have two good options, which means we probably don't have a great option at field corner at this point, and it could affect how everything else looks on the defense. Then it puts more pressure on your pass rush because your pass rush has to get there faster. It puts more pressure on your safeties because your safeties are the last line of defense and have to make up for any mistakes that your field corner may make, any corner, right? And then it puts more pressure on your offense because if you're giving up a lot of points in the pass rush and on defense, then, in the secondary and on defense, then your offense has to match those points. So I think this Texas football team will be fine. Nick Saban thinks this football team will be fine. That's why he put us in the SEC championship against Georgia. But I do think the fact that we had a not great pass defense last year, which was ranked in the hundreds, we're about 5 weeks away from the season now. We still don't know who our field corner is going to be. I've noticed that. I've said it on the podcast that I think that that's a concern. Nick Saban has mentioned it as a concern, so it's always confirmation bias when you and the GOAT are saying the same things. But seriously, right? I think Javion Cole is a great football player. I think Gavin Holmes is a great football player. But I think right now, until I see different on the field, the fact that we don't have a definitive starter at that position tells me that field corner may be a liability at some point in the season. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns. Oh. Wait, what did I completely messed that up. Just give me a second. Threw me off. I pressed the wrong thing. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Gametime. All right, Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace on Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Priority last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Save even more when you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Gametime, right? Get your tickets. Locked On College. Use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. I promise you, the cheapest tickets in the sporting industry by far. Tap in, especially this football season. All right, so talking about Mike Elko, he had some very interesting comments yesterday at SEC Media Days, and I'm excited to see Texas A&M this year. One, because we're finally in the same conference, with them, so we're going to be more interested in every A&M game. Like before, we were just hate watching A&M, just hoping they lost every game. And now we're still going to be hate watching A&M, hoping they lose every game. But now it actually means something to us, right, in terms of the SEC standings. And, obviously that's going to be a mammoth matchup against Texas A&M. I think November 24th. I don't remember the exact date. But whenever we travel to Kyle Field, that's going to be a mammoth matchup. But I think that the Jimbo situation and just everything that's been going on with Texas A&M has kind of clouded people's judgment on how talented this roster still is, right? Is it a national championship level roster? Probably not. But I still think just from pure talent and blue chip ratio, it's probably still one of the 10 most talented rosters in college football. So certainly they can make some noise, especially when you have one of the best players at the position in the country in Connor Weigman. Now, some people have him top 3, some people have him top 6, right? But wherever you have him, I think he's one of the best signal callers in the country. So a really good player, and I think Texas A&M can make some noise. The other day in the group chat, Texas Homer asked us to rank the teams in the SEC because he's doing a preseason poll, or he has a vote for the preseason poll. So I'm just looking now to see where I ranked A&M. So I have them the 8th best team in the conference, right? I have them behind Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M. Right, so I have them right there, smack dab in the middle of the conference, right? But I think every team above them is going to be, good to really good this year. So I could see Texas A&M making some noise. Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus came on and he said, he definitely wouldn't be surprised if they went 8-4 or 9-3 this season. So yeah, I'm excited to see A&M football this year. Now, in terms of some quotes from Mike Elko that caught my attention or caught my eye, the first one is he was asked about playing good out of conference teams like Notre Dame. If you're not aware, Texas A&M's first game of the season is going to be against Notre Dame, and Marcus Freeman. So that's going to be a really good game, one of the best non-con games of the season. Obviously, doesn't compare to Texas and Michigan, but Texas A&M Notre Dame is certainly going to be a game we're really interested in watching. And he said, "I'm a football coach. I like to play no teams of that caliber." Right. And so he's saying, I don't want to play teams like Notre Dame out of conference. Right. And we've always kind of made fun of, teams or Texas A&M, excuse me, for scheduling FCS opponents, right? Where Texas has always scheduled the big out of conference opponents. But in this scenario, I think Mike Elko, I don't want to say he's right, but I think Mike Elko is justified in what he's saying. Like, at the end of the day, he's a football coach. His job is to win football games. If you could put 12 Vanderbilts on the schedule, I'm sure he would take that, right? Like, and I think we would want him to be more competitive. We would want him to say, yeah, give me, Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, every year, right? Like, we would expect him to say that. All the best teams are in the SEC now. He's all ran out of teams to say, Michigan. But, like, he's just being honest, right? He's a football coach. His job is to win games, right? He gets paid. He gets job security based on how many games he wins, right? Not I guess it does matter the quality of the wins. But now that there's a 12-team playoff, there's nothing stopping a 10-2 Texas A&M team from getting into the playoffs, regardless of what their schedule looks like, regardless of what their non-con schedule looks like. A 10-2 A&M team is guaranteed to get in the playoffs, and a 9-3 A&M team will always be on the cusp, regardless of who they play. I feel like the athletic director, right, and the big boys up front, right, they have a responsibility to the fans, right, and for revenue. And so for fans and revenue, you want those big out of conference matchups because that leads to more money, right? When Texas is playing LSU in 2019, when they're playing Arkansas in 2021, when they're playing Alabama in 2022 and 2023, and then the next 4 years they're playing Michigan or Ohio State on the road or at home, that leads to a great fan experience and that leads to more revenue. But what that does not necessarily lead to is more wins or a better chance of being in the playoffs. So I think Mike Elko is just being honest. Like, I'll let the AD worry about the fan experience. You know what I'm saying? I'll let the AD worry about the revenue. My job is to coach and win football games. And the easiest way to coach and win football games is against inferior competition. Then when you look at it, you already have 8 daunting SEC games, right? Why would I give myself another tough task in the out of conference schedule when I could play FCS, Southeast, Mid-East, Midwest, you know what I mean? Like, whatever they got on NCAA 25, right? So, I know as Texas fans, because we've been spoiled and our university is definitely taking care of us in terms of the non-con schedule, we can laugh at A&M. But a football coach, like, I think he's just being honest. Like, why would I rather play Notre Dame than ULM? You know what I mean? Like, and as a, I'm not a football coach, but I respect it, right? Like, if you're trying to win games, if your only goal is to win games, then hell yeah, you'd rather play a FCS opponent than Notre Dame or Ohio State or Oregon or any core 4 team out of conference. Like, I think he was just being honest, you know what I mean? So I respect it. Then his next quote was, he was asked about recruiting, right? And how Oklahoma and Texas joining the conference would affect recruiting. And he said he doesn't think so, or he doesn't think it would have a big impact on recruiting. And I'm always partial because it's like, what is he supposed to say, right? Is he supposed to say like they finna come up here and blow the spot up? Like, is he about to say like we have no chance to recruit great players now that Texas and Oklahoma are in the conference? Like at the end of the day, he has to have Aggie pride, right? So I understand that, but he's just functionally wrong, right? When you look at Oklahoma in any given year, their roster is going to be at least 30 to 40% Texas players, like players that went to high school in the state of Texas. At least, I'm probably being generous with that. I haven't looked at their roster, but I would say at least 30 to 40% of their players are going to come from the state of Texas. So if Oklahoma is now in the SEC, you're competing with Oklahoma for those players in the state of Texas. The University of Texas is the flagship institution in this state, right? So before, you had the advantage of saying we were the only Texas team in the state of Texas, right? We're the only SEC team in the state of Texas, I should say, right? So any player from the state of Texas that wanted to play in the SEC, and that was like a big factor to them, would be more partial to A&M than Texas because that gave them the opportunity to play in the best conference in college football. But now Texas is in the SEC. So you don't have that trump card over the University of Texas. Now Texas is a better program. So you don't have that trump card over the University of Texas. So you have two blue blood programs who are currently in a higher state than you in terms of where they're, the health of their program, right? They're both healthier programs than you right now. And they both recruit exceptionally well in the state of Texas, which is your primary base. I do think Texas A&M will still be able to recruit at a high level, but to say that Oklahoma and Texas won't affect Texas A&M recruiting at all is just naive and ignorant. But once again, he's the head coach of Texas A&M. What is he supposed to say, right? Quick word from our sponsors, and then I get into Sam Pitman from Arkansas saying that he agrees with Steve Sarkisian that Arkansas fans may hate Texas more than they love themselves. Woo! All right, so on the surface, this looks crazy, right? Like on the surface, this looks very crazy. Like even if you believe this, I'm not sure that this is something that you should say. But I think he's absolutely right, right? I think Steve Sarkisian, whether he was taking a shot or giving them a compliment, right? I think he kind of meant it as a compliment. Like that's just a ravaged fan base, and that's just a savage rivalry or a rivalry that extends, back to 1894. I learned yesterday. I mean, my Lord, so obviously there's a lot of people that are, very excited about that. There's a lot of people that, didn't really get to see the renewal of this rivalry, whether it be this year or in 2021. That spent a lot of time, in the trenches watching Arkansas and Texas games. So, this rivalry goes back 99 years before I was born, right? So obviously it's a huge thing. And I do think that when you have programs like Arkansas, I shouldn't even say programs like Arkansas, but especially they're in the state now, like in the state that their program is in now, what do they have to look forward to this season? Like if I'm an Arkansas fan, the things that could excite me the most are beating Texas and beating Missouri, right? I know we're not winning the SEC. I know we're not making the playoffs. And I know we're not winning the national championship, right? So at that point, you pivot to, I want to beat my rivals, right? Now, Steve Sarkisian said that, and then Sam Pitman echoed it, right? And Sam Pitman says, when we played them a couple of years back, it was the most excited our fan base has been in a while. So I would say he's probably right. Once again, I don't think he's lying, but I probably wouldn't necessarily say that. But the thing is when you look at the University of Texas, Texas is always going to be on a pedestal, whether we're good or not, right? The Cowboys, the Lakers, the Yankees, any other team you can think of in that ilk, right? They're always going to be on a pedestal. And we've seen even great teams, even great programs like Oklahoma, they base their identity around beating Texas or being better than Texas. Their sign is the horns down, right? We've seen, I know I'm talking to a lot of Cowboys fans. I feel like the Philadelphia Eagles, like they've been a great team. They won a Super Bowl in 2017. They went back in 2022. But I feel like their main identity is we're better than the Cowboys. Like that team y'all hype up, that team y'all put on a pedestal, we're better than them, right? So it's like almost little brother syndrome, even though these teams are on our level or have been better in recent memory. But like I said, the Cowboys, the Longhorns, the Yankees, the Lakers, teams like that, Duke basketball, they will always be on a pedestal. And the main goal of these programs, well, I shouldn't say the programs, right? Because they're just out there trying to get wins and, accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. But the main goal of these fan bases, right? These emotional fans, we're emotional too, right? But these emotional fans is to knock Texas, the Lakers, the Yankees, the Cowboys, whatever, off of that pedestal. So, yeah, I think it's true. I don't think it's true that Arkansas fans hate Texas more than they love themselves, right? Because they only play Texas once a year and have only played them once in the last however long, right? It's been a long time. But I do think that in these moments, right, when Texas is playing Arkansas or when Texas is playing Oklahoma, or when any team goes against Texas, when any team goes against the Yankees, the Lakers, the Cowboys, anything like that, they give you extra juice. You give extra umph. They bring a little extra to the table when they play that game, right? Because like I said, all of these teams are on a pedestal and they're going in with a chip on their shoulder saying, we need to knock this team off the pedestal. So, yeah, Arkansas is going to play you a little bit harder than they play Auburn, right? Like, that's just the reality of the fact, right? Like, Arkansas, that's a rivalry game, but Mississippi State, right, is going to play you harder than they play Auburn, right? Because it's Texas. You know what I mean? And so I do think that when you look at it and when you look at, in the context of that game or in the context of Arkansas season, the best thing they probably could do for their fan base this year is beat the University of Texas because they have no other realistic aspirations outside of that. If Arkansas was a national championship contender like Georgia, right, then we wouldn't be saying Georgia fans hate Texas more than they love themselves, right? Because Georgia has actual definitive accomplishments and accolades that they can reach this year. But I think in the specific situation that Arkansas is in right now, and the specific situation that Texas A&M is in right now, where their programs trying to get back to that level of success and, A&M trying to get there for the first time for real, I do think that their main focus, or I wouldn't say main focus, but I do think nothing would excite them more. Nothing would make them happier, even regardless of what happens during the season. If they were to look up at the end and say, we beat Texas, that was really all they would need, right? An A&M fan, an Arkansas fan, even Oklahoma fans last year, after they beat us and were 6-0, they end up 10-3, go 4-3 down the stretch. And all you hear all offseason is, well, we beat Texas, right? So just programs like that put Texas on a pedestal or confirm the pedestal that Texas is already on, they're constantly punching up. And a team like Arkansas this year, their goal is going to be to knock Texas off that pedestal because that's one of the few goals they can actually achieve this year. And even that is going to be daunting. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. Elko. Peace.